So what is the significance behind Wang Yi's visit to Pyongyang? I spoke with Karl Friedhoff. He's a fellow in public opinion and Asia policy at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. He says China has a big part in finding peace on the Korean Peninsula.
China was one of the signatories to the Korean War armistice, and so if that is going to be formally ended, the Korean War that is, of course China is going to need to be involved. But it seems that all the relevant parties right now, or actually all the involved parties, have gone out of the way to keep China out of this. We haven't heard South Korea really call for China's involvement. North Korea has done the same, and the United States seems to be happy to be dealing directly with North Korea. So I'm sure this is going to be used as a way for China to reinsert itself and to try to suss out exactly what North Korea is up to, and perhaps for North Korea to also go to China and see what China is willing to do in terms of sanctions and easing them on livelihood loopholes.
Well, and you mentioned the sanctions. Isn't also part of this about repairing the relationship between China and the DPRK?
Right, it's not been a secret that the relations between China and the DPRK have long been strained. Of course, North Korea relies heavily on the Chinese economy, but it's never willing to openly admit that. So, of course, the North Korea wants to go back and ensure that relations can perhaps be repaired with China and try to see some economic benefits at the same time.
And looking pretty far ahead, depending what shakes out here in the next several weeks, do you think China could take part in future nuclear inspections in the DPRK, and what would a dismantlement process look like?
Well, before any dismantlement process can begin, of course, we need North Korea to announce its nuclear facilities, and all of those may not be known, and it may leave some off the list. But that gives the international community a chance to compare its list, perhaps the U.S. primarily, against the North Korean list, and then the negotiations can actually begin once we know what we're actually talking about. If we move on to a verification process, of course I expect some Chinese members to be part of that team, but this should all be left up to the IAEA. The IAEA has done this for a very long time. It's very good at it. It's now practicing this in Iran. And so an international group will be good, but that should absolutely be led by the IAEA rather than trying to come up with scientists or experts from individual countries simply because they are in the region.
And Karl, there are reports that Chinese President Xi Jinping could visit Pyongyang in June. If he does, what can we expect there? I mean, this could happen after the Trump-Kim summit.
Right, with Xi going to Pyongyang, obviously, this is a huge diplomatic push by Kim Jong-un. We saw over the weekend, while I was in Seoul, actually, the Moon-Kim summit, and the attitudes in South Korea have shifted dramatically on Kim Jong-un. Now there's a lot of trust towards him in some of the more shocking poll results. But I think we also need to remember that this is someone who has run afoul of the international community, continues to operate prison camps and human rights abuses, and so we need to be careful about officially accepting this leader into the international community and legitimizing him with some of these visits and pomp and circumstance.
All right, Karl Friedhoff in Chicago, we appreciate your time. Thank you.